James Warren submitted essays to the local newspaper under the name Helvitius Priscus. Now, Helvitius Priscus was the name of a Roman Republican who resisted the dictator Nero. So Rome had a republic for 500 years. A republic, they had senators, they had representatives, but power was concentrated into Julius Caesar and then these other dictators, and one of them was Nero. And Nero was the one who persecuted the Christians. Nero started the persecution of Christians and would tie them on poles and cover them with tar and light them on fire. They were called Nero's torches. And he started the Colosseums where they'd put Christians and throw them to the lions. That was Nero. And so there was a Republican senator in Rome named Helvitius Priscus, and he was criticizing Nero. You got to have a lot of guts to be able to do that. So here's James Warren using that name and writing letters against those who were wanting to put together the new government, saying, hey, we don't want to have power reconcentrating again into the hands of Nero. So on December 27, 1787, the Independent Chronicle published an article by Helvitius Priscus in which James Warren criticized the Constitutional Convention. Listen to some of the words that he said. That assembly, who have ambitiously and daringly presumed to annihilate the sovereignties of the 13 United States. So he understood that the states should be supreme, not the federal government. And then to establish a draconian code. Now, Draco lived in Greece before Plato and before Solon. And Draco had these laws in Greece where every other crime, the penalty was death. So they called it draconian. And so here he's criticizing what's going on. He says this draconian code, this power that's going to take away rights from the states. James Warren continues, and to bind posterity by their secret consuls. What's the secret consul? Well, the U.S. Constitution was written in secret. They made an agreement that nobody was going to talk about it outside. And they made an agreement that nobody would publish the records of the convention until decades afterwards. James Warren referred to the Lycian League. Now, I know I'm flashing back to ancient history, but the Lycian League was in Greece, and they were an example of a confederation of individual city-states that worked together. And so James Warren is saying, okay, we got individual 13 states, and we're working together to have this federal government, but we want to make sure the federal government doesn't get too strong. Most of the power we want to stay with the states. He's talking about Greece and the city-states, and they had this little league where they would get together, but they kept their independence. All right, so it's called the Lycian League. And so James Warren talks about the Lycian League, these independent Greek city-states, which existed from the 8th century BC up until Phillip of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great, that conquered it all. So James Warren writes this. Everyone acquainted with ancient history turned their thoughts to the miserable fate of the Lycians, a sober, virtuous people who maintained their independence and their freedom for several centuries and supported their own simple institutions under 23 district sovereignties. So we had 13 colonies, they had 23. A people bearing a strong resemblance to a party in America had crept in among them. And an ambitious Phillip had his emissaries in that body. Now, what's he talking about? So we got these 23 Lycian states, and Phillip sort of wanted to consolidate them and make himself as close as possible to being in charge. And so he sent people in to these 23 different city-states, talking them into giving up their power. So James Warren continues, who, by political intrigue and well-timed plausible speeches, enabled him, Phillip, to set himself as the head of the Grecian states, to annihilate their constitutions and to degrade them to the most abject submission to the will of a despotic tyrant. So he's talking about how this Lycian League, 23 city-states worked together, had this little federal government, but they kept it small. But Phillip, in charge of the federal government, wanted to get them, so he had all kinds of nice speeches and things. Hey, there's an emergency or whatever, let me have your power. And then he finally consolidated it, and he became a tyrant. The tyrant alleged the same excuse for his encroachment that we hear hackneyed in our streets of our capital, James Warren says, for subjugating the Americans. James Warren added, "The application is left for the consideration of every lover of his country. America has fought for her liberties, purchased them by the most costly sacrifices, and shall her freedom be sported away by duplicity and the intrigues of those who never participated in her sufferings?" We'll be right back.